What is up, guys? Welcome to DeFi Digs, where we dig deep into decentralized finance projects from around the crypto realm. Today, we're going to be taking a very high-level look at some popular DeFi apps just to show you guys some of the things that you can actually do in DeFi and why you might want to get involved and start tinkering. This video is going to be for individuals that haven't really used or even seen a DeFi app before and just want to get an idea of what they look like. It's always easier to understand things once you kind of tinker and actually visually see them. Of course, none of this is financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only. Okay, a couple notes before we dig in. I'm going to mention stablecoins quite a bit. And if you're not familiar with stablecoins yet, they're cryptocurrencies that are pegged to a specific unit. In most cases, that unit is USD, as in the US dollar, but there are Euro versions and others as well. The most common ones are USDC, which is Circle, and then USDT, which is by Tether. So right here is just the chart of stablecoins only. So there are quite a lot, as you can see. There's $72 billion worth of Tether out there and about $34 billion worth of USDC. So these are the ones that you're going to see most frequently on, exchanges and just in DeFi apps. The way that some of these hold their peg to the US dollar does differ. These two are backed by actual assets, whereas some of the others are algorithmically backed or over collateralized like DAI. For the sake of this video, what you need to know is that stablecoins are pegged to the US dollar, and therefore they aren't exposed to the volatility that you would typically find in traditional crypto assets. So they're a great way to sort of park your funds or interact with DeFi apps without actually being exposed to big price movements of things like Ethereum and whatnot. Now, a DeFi app is an application or a protocol that is created by somebody or a team of developers that is deployed on top of a blockchain such as Ethereum. Ethereum itself is not an app. It's a network that protocols can be built on top of. These are also known as layer ones. Many of the cryptos that you see on an exchange like Coinbase or Binance are layer ones. This is the top 100 coins by market cap on CoinGecko, and you can just see many of them are in fact layer ones. Ethereum is a layer one, Solana, Cardano, Polkadot, Terra, Avalanche, a lot of them. The ones that are not layer ones are mostly apps that are just built on top of them. The important thing to note is that these do not belong to a company, which is what makes them decentralized. And because they're decentralized, the fees that would typically go to the company go to the users of the platform instead. This is why you're able to see much higher yields than you would in traditional banking. Now, to interact with these apps, you need a wallet. There are many wallets, the most popular of which is MetaMask. I'll be covering wallets more extensively in the next video, but just know that your wallet is sort of what acts as your login and allows you to connect and interact with these blockchains and how you can sort of retrieve and send your funds. The first app I'm going to talk to you about is Liquity, which is a borrowing and lending protocol. Borrowing and lending are sort of the cornerstones of DeFi. They look a lot different than they do in the sort of traditional sense. In DeFi, all loans are over collateralized. So you need to provide an asset and then you take out crypto against that asset. So if you deposit $1,000 worth of Ethereum, you might be able to take out $500 worth of a stable coin or of another asset against that. They can be open and closed at any time. There typically aren't terms, so to speak, for your loan. You don't have to close it by a certain time. You can kind of keep it open as long as you want. And in some cases, there aren't even interest rates on what you're borrowing. You just would pay an upfront fee, and that's it. And that's the case with Liquity here. So Liquity is a great place to get started. They focus only on letting people borrow against their Ethereum. Now you could use Ethereum in a number of DeFi apps, but Ethereum is a very difficult asset to get high yield on. A lot of the main kind of base assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana are difficult to get a high yield on compared to some of the other assets. So an alternative option would be to come to a place like Liquity, deposit however much Ether you have, and then borrow against that. So in this example, if we were to deposit 2 Ethereum, which is about $9,000 total as of right now, and let's say we wanted to borrow $3,000 against that, we could do that very easily. I don't have any Ether in this wallet, but down here it'll give you some details on the transaction. So if the value of your debt exceeds a certain ratio, then you could get liquidated just to keep the protocol safe. The value of that is 90% in Liquity, which is quite high. Usually it's much lower. You can typically only take out, around 50%. We'll say it varies depending on the protocol, but in Liquity it's a lot higher. So in this example, we can deposit 2 Ether. We can take out 3,000 LUSD, which is a stable coin, and use that $3,000 to do whatever we want. We can cash it out and pay some bills. We can swap it into another asset, swap it over for Bitcoin or something. We could just buy Ethereum with it and then deposit that Ethereum back into Liquity and kind of lever yourself up that way. Down here, you'll see the liquidation price. So if Ethereum were to drop down to this level, you would be liquidated. 1650 is a pretty safe price at this point, but if you want it to be really safe, maybe you only borrow 2,000, that would drop your liquidation price down to 1,100. If you want to be a little bit more risky, you could do 4,500. That would increase your liquidation up to 2,475. You'll see a fee here. One-time fee of $34.71. One of the unique things about Liquity is there's no interest rate, so you can hold this loan open for as long as you want, and you don't have to worry about accumulating interest that you have to pay. So that's really nice. Once you have your LUSD, like I said, you can do whatever you want with it. To then redeem your 2 ETH, you would just need to acquire the amount of LUSD that you borrowed. So in this case, 4,500. Repay our 4,500 here, and then we would be able to withdraw our 2 ETH. It's that simple. Liquity is kind of a great starting point just because a lot of people have Ethereum. It's a very tough asset to earn a high yield on, and this will kind of free up funds and allow you to invest in some other things while still holding on to your Ethereum. Next up, we're going to look at Aave. Aave is a borrowing and lending protocol where you can deposit crypto, earn a yield on that crypto as others borrow it, and then borrow against your deposited crypto as well. So Aave is the biggest DeFi app in terms of the amount of money that's locked in the protocol. This is the Ethereum main net right here that has over $16 billion on it. I think in totality across all of the chains that they're on, they're right around 20 billion. So a lot of money locked in here. This is kind of the dashboard here. This is the list of assets that you have an option to deposit. Obviously a lot more. Liquity is just Ethereum. Aave has quite a few. So the deposit APY is going to represent how much you'll get if you deposit that asset into the platform. The borrow APY is your interest rate if you were to borrow, which you would be borrowing against whatever you deposited. So you could not borrow unless you deposit something. So when we look at some of these assets, some of them should look familiar now. We have DAI, we have USDC, USDT, which we talked about, Ethereum. The deposit APY for USDT, for example, is a little over 7%. So that's pretty good. You can find higher, but when you compare it to your traditional bank account, obviously it kind of shits on that. So a lot of people will just take their cash, put it into USDT or USDC, and then plop it in Aave, and you're just gonna earn 7% on that. These rates are variable based on how much is deposited and how much is being borrowed, but for the most part in Aave they stick right around that 6-7% mark. You can also deposit Ether. Like I said, it's kind of difficult to earn yield, so this is kind of an example of that. Super low yield, but remember, anything you deposit in here can be used as collateral to borrow against. So if you deposit 2 Ether, like we did in our Liquity example, then you'll be able to borrow against that. I don't know what the actual borrow rate is and how much you'd be able to borrow on that. I know it's less than Liquity, but it is an option here as well. In Aave, you will be paying a borrow interest rate, so just bear that in mind. So that's kind of the gist of Aave. Like I said, one of the top DeFi apps in the world, very safe, very secure, great option to kind of stash some cash or borrow against some assets if you wanted to deposit that in here. Next up is index co-op. You guys are, I'm sure, familiar with index funds, which you can invest in traditional markets. The same thing exists in crypto. If you wanted to just invest in kind of a group of DeFi protocols or metaverse protocols, it might take you quite a while to kind of research those and figure out which ones are good. And if you don't have time for that, or you just don't want to do that, index co-op is a really good option. They currently have 4 indexes. DeFi Pulse, which is an index just of big DeFi protocols. If you scroll down, you can actually see what is in the index. Aave is listed here, as well as some others that you may or may not recognize. So this is a great way to get exposure just to DeFi in general without actually buying the individual crypto. They also have a metaverse index. There's a lot of noise around metaverse right now, and there probably will be for quite a while. So this is a super interesting one. You can see how this has performed over the last 3 months. And then they also have some others as well. So the Bankless Bet Index is actually a mixture of Ethereum, Bitcoin, and then the DeFi index that I showed you first. So this is kind of a cool option if you just don't want to spend time kind of rebalancing or researching which cryptos to invest in. It's kind of a nice option. So the last one we're going to be looking at is Sushi. This one is something that's unique to crypto. It is a decentralized exchange, or a DEX. So just like Coinbase or Binance, where you can swap assets. Those ones are centralized. Coinbase provides a liquidity. They take some of the fees. On Sushi or a DEX, the liquidity is actually provided by people like you and I. And because it's decentralized, all of the fees that the platform generates goes to the individuals that are actually providing that liquidity. So if you wanted to swap, let's say LUSD that you got from Liquity, you would come here, choose LUSD, and then maybe you want to turn that into Ethereum. You would just put the amount in. It's going to give you the amount that you would receive, and then you would just swap that over. Now, anytime that a swap happens, you're utilizing a liquidity pool. And if you wanted to become a liquidity provider, you can do that by going to pool, hitting add, and let's say we want to do USDC an Ethereum. Let's say you have Ethereum and you have some USDC and you want to add to this pool. You do it 50-50 ratio. So you would do, if you were doing $1,000 total, $500 worth of Ethereum, $500 worth of USDC, and you would add that pool. In the bottom left, we're going to click on analytics. This is going to show us just some stats on the pools. So the pool that I just mentioned was the USDC Ethereum pool. It's the 4th highest in terms of total value locked at $440 million. To the far right, we can see the fees and the APY that we would receive on those fees on average. So in this pool specifically, it is just under 10%. So this is kind of a nice place to park some of your capital just to kind of earn on it. There is something called impermanent loss that sort of shifts the balance that you have based on the performance of each asset. So this is a stable coin. Ethereum is obviously going to go up, where USDC is going to stay at $1. That's going to shift the value of your balance a little bit. I'm not going to dig into that too much. I'll have a separate video sort of dedicated just to that topic, but it is something that you should be aware of and have a good understanding of before you provide liquidity. That's going to wrap this video up. I know it was super high level, but the next one will be a little bit more in depth and focused on what the actual first steps are to go from exchange to actually interacting with these apps. We'll cover things like setting up wallets, tools to discover these apps, and the differences between some of the different chains and protocols. If you found the video helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribing. I'll be doing a lot more beginner level videos in the future, so if there's anything in particular that you want to see, just leave a comment or hit me on Twitter. See ya.